It all began in 1896, when George Carmack discovered gold on the other side of the Alaskan mountains in the Yukon. And within months, a rush for riches to the Klondike goldfields would ensue, and fortune seekers would sail north from Vancouver, Seattle, and San Francisco, here along the inside passage of the Pacific Ocean, to the port of Skagway, Alaska, a soon-to-be boomtown sitting at the mouth of the Skagway River. From here, they would climb the short but steep Chilkoot Trail, or opt for the longer but less steep White Pass Trail. Both options would meet up at the junction of the Canada-US border, where the fortune seekers would then have to build boats at the base of Lake Bennett and begin a 100-mile journey to Whitehorse in the Yukon, and either board a steamship if you were wealthy enough, or continue on your own boat 450 miles down the Yukon River to Dawson City just for the hope to strike it big. Very few men would actually make it to Dawson due to the grueling haul to get there. But with Skagway, Alaska being the closest seaport to the Klondike, a railway through the White Pass en route to the Yukon was within sight. American Railroad pioneer Michael Henry, better known as Big Mike, would lead this project. And when the critics told him that it could not be done, Big Mike fired back with one of the best lines in railway history. "If you give me enough dynamite and snus, I'll build you a railway to hell and back." And listen, the man definitely loved his Swedish tobacco, but construction would begin on the project on May 27th, 1898, and within weeks, the first steam locomotive had arrived on site. But the challenges were unimaginable. 30-foot snowdrifts, conquering sheer cliffs, with no prior surveys completed. Somehow, within less than 8 months, despite the fact that almost none of the workers had any experience building railways, they would use over 450 tons of explosives to push the route to the top of the seemingly insurmountable summit. In the dead of a harsh Alaskan winter, the first 20 miles out of Skagway ascended over 3,000 feet at a grade of 3.9%, which is the biggest grade any steam locomotive could handle without the need for special equipment. And this build would average $100,000 per mile to build. But back then, this was an absolutely staggering sum of money. They'd reached Lake Bennett in July of that year, and on July 29th of 1900, they'd drive home the last spike in Carcross, Yukon, to officially unite Skagway to Whitehorse by rail, at a final cost of $10 million. The Impossible Railway was completed. They had constructed bridges on cliff sides that didn't exist, trestles over unthinkable heights, including a steel cantilever bridge built over the Dead Horse Gulch, soaring over 200 feet above the river, which at the time was the tallest in the entire world. Now, only a few weeks after the last spike was driven home, the gold rush had come to an abrupt end. The gold fields had been wiped clean, and although the White Pass would continue passenger service until 1908, it had become completely unprofitable, so they had turned exclusively to freight service from that moment on. But by the 1980s, tourism and cruise ships to Skagway had taken off, and passenger service would resume in 1986, operating only from Skagway to Carcross over in the Yukon, not fully to Whitehorse, but this excursion had become so popular that it would become the White Pass and Yukon sole service only 2 years later in 1988, abandoning all freight service from that point on. Now, a century ago, this route made millionaires, but today, Skagway is a cute and quaint town that sees over 1.5 million tourists a season. And this town has a whole lot of historic charm, and over 600,000 of those 1.5 million cruise ship passengers will ride a White Pass and Yukon passenger train every year. Marked by the tower and glacier-capped peaks of Mount Harding, this brings me to my experience in Alaska to ride the most scenic steam train in the world.